A horror movie is only as good as its villain. There's a reason why Leatherface, Jason, and Freddy became household names, while protagonists like Nancy from A Nightmare on Elm Street and, that one guy from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 whose name totally escapes me need to be googled. And that's because audiences remember things they're scared of more than things they're not. However, while there are plenty of great horror bad guys, not all of them get a send-off brutal enough to match their reputations. In fact, in a couple of cases, these villains went out like such chumps that it undermined any of the terror they might have once dished out, leaving audiences thinking, oh, is that it? Sometimes a better death was found in a sequel, but other times, the last thing viewers saw was them disappearing like a wet fart in the wind. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 9 horror movie villains that had totally lame deaths. Number 9, La Llorona, The Curse of La Llorona. The Conjuring cinematic universe, which I'm right now coining the CCU, yep, take that Marvel, has been pretty hit and miss so far. Okay, it's been mostly miss with the exception of the 2 mainline Conjuring movies, but what the spin-offs have lacked in story and scares, they've mostly made up for in memorable monsters. Take The Nun, for instance. That movie was, and I don't say this lightly, my arse, but audiences bought tickets anyway because the monster itself is such a terrifying creation, and has a silhouette that'll make you look twice at the coats hanging on the back of your bedroom door when you find yourself waking up unexpectedly at 4 AM. The villain got a death to match the ferocity of the design as well, with it taking the literal blood of Christ to kill her in an explosion of effects. The Curse of La Llorona didn't do its title character justice in the same way though. Not only was the film a total slog, but La Llorona goes out with little fanfare, with it only taking a crucifix jabbed in the heart for her to be vanquished. That's the kind of first death most horror movie monsters receive before immediately returning for a proper send-off. But here, that was it. It felt like a poor man's version of the Nun's demise, and something that would be more at home in an episode of Supernatural. Number 8, Asami, Audition. Audition is one of the greatest horror movies ever made, led by the chilling, unnerving Asami, who closes the film out by torturing the man she's seeing, Aoyama. It's so good, in fact, that you'll easily forgive it for killing Asami at the end in the strangest way possible. As mentioned, the final reel of the film focuses on her torturing the man she's dating. Previously, she's come across as relatively meek and weak, though there's clearly something twisted behind the eyes. The finale reveals her to be a devilishly intelligent psychopath as she drugs Aoyama and toys with him, all the while sticking needles in his eyes and chopping off one of his feet. I've had worse dates. The only thing that stops her torment is the unexpected arrival of Aoyama's son. However, Asami reacts smartly to this as well, getting the drop on him with a bottle of mace. Despite having the upper hand, the son, who's in his early teens by the way, gets away and scrambles up the stairs, where he relatively easily kicks her down, which twists her neck. It's over in less than a minute and makes Asami's end feel a little bit hollow. Number 7, Jason, Friday the 13th Part 3. Jason has gone through a lot of bollocks over the course of the Friday the 13th franchise. He wasn't even the original villain, and since joining properly in Part 2, he's died a bunch of times, came back as a zombie, invaded Manhattan, been to hell, and then space, and even faced off against Freddy Krueger. He's one tough dude, or I guess one tough zombie dude, but his first of many deaths did not live up to his reputation as a badass. Part 3 follows Jason finally donning the iconic hockey mask and, you guessed it, once again going to town on a bunch of teens, including Chris and a biker called Ali. After the usual shenanigans, it comes down to the 2 of them in a barn for a final confrontation with the masked killer. And it's not quite the fireworks display the build-up suggested. Chris manages to whack Jason on the noggin and then hang him by a rope, but that's not enough and he pulls himself free. Afterwards, he tussles with Ali and Chris plonks Jason on the head again, this time with an axe, and then she just wins. In the end, all it took was one swing to take the hulking monster down. However, this ending might be so underwhelming because the original ending actually ended with Jason beheading Chris until it was changed to a victory. Number 6, Dollface and Pinup Girl, The Stranger's Prayer Night. For the most part, The Strangers Prey at Night is a pretty good sequel, but halfway through it becomes clear that this isn't the follow-up fans waited years to see. That's because the strangers the title refers to, those masked psychopaths out for a night of hunting, were formidable foes in the original movie, capable of toying with their prey and overpowering them at every turn. But the sequel makes it clear that they're very much human. In fact, the second half of the movie essentially turns the tables on the regular horror dynamic, and it's actually the villains who are slowly dispatched one by one. This isn't quite the spectacle it could have been though, as two of the antagonists are easily overpowered, with a lone heroine quickly dispatching the female killers. The main stranger, the man in the mask, gets a much more satisfying death, but it kinda makes you wonder how any of them got through the first movie alive when they're so easily killed by one person. Alright, and another heavily wounded person in the sequel. Number 5, The Horde Glass. Now this one is a bit of an anomaly on this list, but it still counts because James McAvoy's The Horde originated in Split, which is very much a straight horror movie. His character, or I guess characters, survived that flick, and returned a few years later in director M. Night Shyamalan's long-anticipated superhero movie, Glass. Well, it's technically a superhero movie, but it actually blends a bunch of genres from horror to sci-fi. Once again, the Horde acts as the villain, crawling on the walls with his super strength and tearing the heads off anyone who gets in his way. That's until he comes across Bruce Willis's David though, who's the only person who can go toe-to-toe with him without instantly dying. Sadly, the showdown between the two that fans waited years to see doesn't really happen, and instead the two die unceremoniously. David is drowned in a puddle, and the Horde, now in his Kevin persona, is simply shot in the stomach by a bunch of armed goons. Both deaths were totally lame, so think of this entry as 2 for the price of 1. Number 4, Jack the Shining. Jack Nicholson's performance as the demented Jack in The Shining is one of the most memorably intense of all time, to the point where even if you haven't seen the film, and if you haven't seriously sought that out, you'll have seen this role parodied over and over again. It's a testament to Nicholson's prowess that so many mockeries of the key moments haven't taken away their power, but the same thing can't quite be said for the character's end in the film's climax. After going totally bonkers and chasing his wife and son through a garden maze, Jack gets lost and freezes in the sub-zero temperatures. Granted, it probably makes more sense narratively than Shelley Duvall shanking him, but it's the kind of thing that becomes sillier as the years go by, especially once you've seen it parodied in The Simpsons. Number 3, Freddy Krueger, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. Though there have been some pretty bad offenders on this list so far, the disappointment of Freddy's death in Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare stung extra because, well, it's right there in the title. This was the moment the entire film had been built around. Old Fred Krueger was no stranger to death, and a bunch of the previous films saw him being killed either in the dream world or in reality, but his quote-unquote final film promised to end him once and for all. But for a demon who survived being yanked into reality and booby-trapped to death and had the souls of his victims housed in his chest tear him apart, what was the thing that finally put him down for good? A pipe bomb. A single, crappy pipe bomb. The end of The Final Nightmare sees the once scary villain pinned to a wall and stabbed by his own glove before a pipe bomb is stabbed into his chest as well. Before dying, he quips to the camera because, of course he does, as some of the shoddiest effects you've ever seen focus on his head flying at the lens. I mean, just look at this. Look at the state of this. This was how he was supposed to go. I'm so glad they made a sequel. Number 2, Pennywise, It Chapter 2. It Chapter 2 was undoubtedly one of the most anticipated horror sequels of the decade, but a lot of that pre-release hype focused on how the new movie was going to tackle the ending of the book. The finale of It is infamous for being weird as all hell, as Pennywise the Clown transforms into a massive spider alien-like creature and gets crushed. It looked dumb in the original miniseries considering the effects limitations of the time, so all eyes were on how this would translate over to the new film. Well, brazenly, the flick actually sticks quite close to the original ending, featuring Pennywise as a hulking spider-like creature once again, albeit retaining Bill Skarsgård's face this time around. How he's dispatched is completely different though, and comes totally out of nowhere. After figuring out that Pennywise is constrained by the limitations of the form he takes, the losers attempt to shrink him down to size by forcing him into a hole. When that doesn't work, they realize you can make someone feel small without physically putting them in a small space, and then effectively bully Pennywise down to size by repeatedly calling him a clown. It's an idea which could have worked, but it's one of those deaths that makes you wonder why the losers hadn't tried it before. Likewise, it's extremely similar to the ending of the first It, and it doesn't help that Pennywise looks like a shriveled up testicle before his heart is pulled out either. Number 1. Nemesis, Resident Evil Apocalypse. When it comes to Resident Evil villains, it doesn't get much bigger than Nemesis. The giant monstrosity debuted in the third game and relentlessly hunted players down, tormenting them with a rocket launcher and a punch that could take the head clean off a regular human being. Consequently, when it was revealed that the character would be making his big screen debut in Resident Evil Apocalypse, fans couldn't wait to see the terrifying villain made even scarier now that he was more than about 5 pixels on a screen. This version wasn't a total write-off initially, but all hope was lost by the time it came for him to square off against hero Alice. Instead of terrorizing her from the shadows, Nemesis was instead placed in a Mortal Kombat-esque one-on-one fight to the death with his opponent. In this setting, nothing about him was scary, and watching this stocky, stiff monster start fighting like he was in the Matrix or something just looked dumb. That's not even his death scene though, because afterwards he turns good through the power of love, I guess, and then is crushed after a helicopter falls on top of him. The scene is so quick and so shoddy that it almost looks like a joke in isolation. Sadly though, that's actually how the biggest Resident Evil villain of all time is dispatched in this movie. Just tossed away like the rest of the continuity.